Okay, first thing, what is a GNU step application project? The GNU step application project, you see the URL get-non-gnu.org. It's a reasonably old project. This has been around since 2002. Currently, it's under the process of being transitioned to a full GNU project at the request of Richard himself. So he wrote me, and I'm proud of that because he requested this. And we are sorting things out. Probably we will split up the project in two and decide which part go into a full-blown GNU project and which will remain non-GNU, which still means it's open source, of course. It's just not under the GNU umbrella. And probably we need to change the name. You can find us sometimes on our IRC channel, which is gap, just because we didn't like the noise on the GNU step channel. Now the GNU step channel is so silent that we don't have the noise problem anymore, but it's useful because people sometimes expect to ask questions, and if they find us around, we try to reply. Calling said, the goal of the GNU step application project is to fill the gap which GNU step has of lack of applications. Because GNU step has many users, so it's such an extensive framework. Some people just use to develop for it and target a specific platform, but actually, since it's an open step child, the goal of it is to have a complete desktop environment with it. Since this is not the explicit goal of the GNU step itself, which provides the GNU step project, which provides the main libraries and a couple of useful application and developer tools, the rest needs to be supplied by other ones. Since picking around applications from different projects is always a mess and confusing for users because you never know where to get things, projects started to clutter and give a consistent environment. I don't know if we are the oldest or the backbone is older than us. I just know that backbone is somehow spoiled and so.
Backbone's older, but I think it was fairly dead.
Yes, officially it's not dead. If you ask them, but they didn't release something for 2 years or so. So essentially, we can express that the GNU step class get gives you our workspace. A bits are missing. We don't have a window manager, and some tools are missing, but you should have a fairly usable environment. What's in GAP? The project originally started as a porting repository. So Gregory John Casamento, which is currently the GNU step maintainer and project leader, he had the idea we would look for open step code and port it to GNU step. Theoretically, it should just recompile. You know, it's not that way, but what we discovered is that open source wasn't around then. It was not well known, so there is no more source of many of the free open step applications, which is sad. Some source code is lying around, but the authors are not willing to give it away. So we know a couple of applications which we do want and which you don't get. Because the authors say, oh, the code is messy, I don't want to release it. No way, we argued many times, just give it to us and we will clean it up. No way. Unfortunately, so this project is a bit on a dead end. So if something comes up, we will do it, but currently it has been lagging. Of course, the applications we will have, like Time Monitor, which is a CPU monitor, has been ported, it's maintained. So now we have the Macintosh, Cocoa, so there can be applications coming from that side. Sometimes there are abandoned projects for Mac, like not maintained anymore. We can just rescue them, port them. So this is the other point here, rescued by other projects. Sometimes people start a project, code a bit, and then it remains there. This is typical of open source. We have many examples. Sometimes these applications are fine, or we even depend on them, and you don't have a place to download them. Nobody even patches them for example, trivial API changes we have in GNU. So essentially it's a BitTorrent, and which is it's a pity. So we try to cut them here, and we have a couple of them, and we at least maintain them functional and improve when we can. So this is, I think, important for the end user experience, because in one place can download them. And there are applications, especially written, so when we write a new application, we will put in here. I myself have not started any extra project anymore. Everything which I do write, I put it in Gap. So what's been outside for historical reasons with them there. Application, utilities, frameworks, everything which is needed. The goal is not to make something which has a lot of kits where we depend on, so you essentially need to install the whole project, which is a bit what it does. We try to be more lightweight. This is maybe not so exciting, we don't have so many extra features, but the idea is that GNU actually has enough API features that you can write complete application. If we need a library, we'll put it here so for completeness. Key people. Gregory John Casamento needs to be mentioned because he's the founder and the project leader, so he needs to know he's in the States and couldn't come to here to attend us, and he would be disappointed with his audience. Then it's me, Riccardo Mottola. I'm the co-leader, and I wrote most of the new applications because Greg is more oriented in reporting, and I wrote original applications, which is like Vespucci, FTP, databases, battery monitor, and other tools. Then there is Adam Fedor, which is a former GNU project leader and a gifted programmer. He's a white person, but he actually maintains picture frame, which is a very nice and cute application. The other people, some are past committers, which disappeared into nothing. Some are not very active. They came with code, came with package, and disappeared for 6 months. And of course, all the original authors, which I don't mention here, they're the authors. Not a long list of active developers, unfortunately. Let's start with the first application, the Penna Magica. It's an image viewer tool. It was inspired by XV. So you just you can open images, you have a list of images you can click. See them in a single window, so if you have a list of images, like make a slideshow in a window, or you can make full screen. And it's currently, as far as you know, the only full screen application in GNU Step, which display images, and it works both on the Mac and on GNU Step, because the main goal we defined about 1 year ago is to try to port every application both on Mac and on GNU Step as a demonstration that we can do that. So if it's possible, if it makes sense, if it's not, of course, a system-dependent application, we will do that. And this one works, even the full screen code works on board.
Come in.
Come in, come in. We should have a screenshot here, but since we can see some of this application live afterwards. It's also a reference for people, for example, wanting to full screen code and scaling code. It should be a lightweight tool, so nothing special. Then there's the FTP application. The interface is pretty standard. It's a 2-pane local remote host. It tries to implement the complete FTP specification, which is rarely found in modern FTP clients. It has both active, passive, and default modes, if you ever need them. They do work. And there's a special note here. It has been ported both to the Macintosh and to Windows. At one point I rewrote the whole core socket code so that it can work with Windows socket. Because I used plain Unix way to do it, and it was just not working correctly on Windows. Even if it should, it didn't work. No way. Now it works, it has some if-defs, but this application actually works on the Mac. On Linux, Unix, Solaris, and Windows. This is a major demonstration of the power of the core kit. It may not be perfect, but it's a useful tool, and actually I think the only maintained FTP application we have in GNU Step. There were others, but where they are now, I don't know. I use it daily, so for what I use it works. It still has some shortcomings. This is a pretty nice application. We are playing with that for yes, before the beginning. It's a vector graphics application. I need to tell you the original author, which is Enrico Sensale. So, very prolific Muslim author. He wrote the whole workspace, system preferences, and other utilities. And he started this application like 8 years ago, something like that. I think it's from 2000. It was called Gido. It was written when Muslim was still limited. It was very OpenStep specific, PostScript code, and the application just remained in beta for 8 years and nobody ever updated that again. It wasn't even completely functional with the updated newsletter. I completely restructured the code, so it has a core and class hierarchy. It's clean now. You can extend it. All the commands were written using the ZIA path, so it can also work on Coco, because Coco doesn't display PostScript anymore. So this is now portable code. The performance is good. It's nice. It's still uses several tools. It means that, for example, you can draw circles, because what's in there it was available originally, so I did not yet extend it. I made it work. Not in the tool, I made the box work. This was to make the box work in a clean way. I need to restructure all the editors. You can say the format is compatible with the old format, even if I don't think there are many files around yet. It works. You can print. It's a document-oriented application. I think it's a nice application with a reasonable potential. It still needs some work. It's not official now. So I don't have made yet a release of the new version. This inner space. This is Gregory's personal toy. This is backspace implementation. So essentially, you have a screensaver running on your desktop. Maybe it's not very useful, but it's nice. It was a GT OpenStep application, and it's now here on GNU-Step. You can animate backdrops, and the modules are compatible with the original version, so there are a couple of modules. Not all are included, because not every module has actually a license, because people drop them in open source without giving it an open source license, so we can't include them here. And this is one of the problems when we migrate to a new project. Probably we need to take them out or leave them somewhere else. Of course, it's easy to write new ones. Picture frame is Adam's creature. It's called picture frame because the ultimate goal is to make a digital picture frame. So it takes a screen, uses an old laptop, made a nice one mount, put it there, and it looks very nice. On the website there are pictures of it actually working. This is actually a screenshot. And he did some nice blending code. It uses alpha channel, and it can display additional information like how time when you shoot the picture, the weather. It's of course intended to run an antenna that has a kiosk. This is a calculator. It uses, of course, reverse Polish notation, because this is what I use. HP calculators are just superior, and I needed one. And I was solely enacting a real scientific calculator. It's not being released under this name, but you could look for it with its old name, which is RPN Guide or something like that. It's the same code. I just changed the license from BSD to GPF because somebody asked that. I think it was Gregory. He has a little everything which is going to GPF. BSD is too permissive. I like BSD, no big issue. Yes, there's a couple of shortcomings, not as much in the Mac version, but in the GNU-Step version, but it's a really minor thing. Code is the same. There's only all the functions work. There is only one thing which strikes me, but I won't speak on it here. If there is a mathematician, we can have a discussion on how to implement the exponential function for non-integer numbers. But I don't think that's interesting. It's just a personal. This is maybe the most discussed application lately. Unfortunately, the icon, because the rest of the code is still unreleased. Why? Because it's changing its own browser. As we discussed for years, we like to have a native closed browser environment for two reasons. First, because our browser is nice to have. Second, because it acts as a testbed for the underlying HTML framework, which can be used, of course, outside a browser, because it can be everywhere when we want to display hypertext. In this case, we use simple WebKit, which is a complete implementation in pure Objective-C of the WebKit API format. So it's a complete scratch and write, which is, of course, a major goal, but it has many advantages. So the code base is cleaner. It's not Objective-C++, so it can run from GCC 295 and up, which means it compiles on embedded devices for different platforms. So we can support a much wider audience, including lots more. So it's nice. Since it's WebKit compatible, on the Mac you can build the browser. Again, the simple WebKit on Cocoa, or even WebKit itself. So this helps, of course, debugging, and you can even display much better pages. The interface is extremely simple. Currently, it just has 4-button history, but it has bookmarks, and it can read and write Safari bookmark format, which is convenient. Of course, you can. There's a screenshot. So, use that page. It shows that it's already reasonably working. Not just 100 compliant. It's coming up. Not to speak about the browser itself, we can later present a simple WebKit framework, which information. Then we have terminal. Terminal originally is on Backbone, so here we actually made use of the open source concept. We can take others' GPL code and put it in our project, because essentially Backbone wasn't maintaining it correctly. They did not accept some patches. It was not portable, and so at the end I just put it in. I asked the author many times, and it was just not progressing as we wished, so we made it compile the latest Make 2.0 version, which was a major shift in makefile. We added the personalized code to make it compile on different platforms, because the emulation is based on the Linux kernel emulation. So for Linux machines, it's very convenient because it's extremely compatible, of course, but it uses calls which were not available outside Linux, and I was replacement for this course, so it actually runs in Solaris. And I know we have a user which uses some Solaris. So it has been a long requested function. It's a multi-window terminus, standard terminus. It's usable and it works very well. Others framework, which is sadly to say a rescue project, because the developer was brilliant, but I think he got busy with other projects. It's an implementation of the address framework of Apple, so API-wise it's the same, essentially, and it has a front end. So the main use is, of course, an address book, but it provides the other services for other applications, and human uses it. So there is one major application which uses the framework, and this is also the most important reason why it needs to be kept up to date, because other rely on it. I think it's very convenient, especially on handheld devices. You want to have your addresses ready. small utility who uses laptops, battery monitor, time monitor, remote test. These are small applications. I'm going to check in the meantime. Just check the home page. Battery monitor just uses your API to display your battery status and some battery information. Time monitor is a CPU monitor. Remote desk is a front end to app desktop, so if you need to connect to Windows terminal services, that's convenient. The parameters and settle online. Nothing special. FlexiSheet. This support. This was an application originally written for Cocoa, so it's open source available on SourceForge, but the project stalled because the author went astray. We wrote him, we were able to contact him, and we had the Office of Permission to put it in our project. It's PL, so it's fine. It's a Quantrix-like spreadsheet implementation. If you know Quantrix, it was a special kind of spreadsheet written for OpenStep. At that time, it was a major. Also, Lotus Info, they have the same concept of two competing spreadsheets. It's an innovative way of looking at spreadsheets. Let's see. Yes, you have a thing that is not that clear. It's different from Excel because you can write data sets here in columns, and each row is a view to the data set, and then you can drag and create different views of the same data. So Excel eventually copied that to the pivot table, but this one is actually more convenient. And the formulas are not written inside a cell, but they're global for the spreadsheet. Because so when you drag around and you change the view, essentially you have a cube and you're slicing it. It's a simple way of looking at a data cube.
Gerald called it a hypercube, multi-dimensional cube.
Yes. Essentially it's a hypercube. And the formulas need to work on all the faces of the cube. This is why you can put them in a static place. Currently the application is reasonably working on the Mac. Unfortunately, they also left it like in beta stage. So what we need to do is clean up the existing code for bugs, because there are some even on the Mac. Identify the porting difference between Cocoa and GNU-Step, and either work them around in the FlexiSheet code itself, if it doesn't count travels in Cocoa, or improve GNU-Step so that it supports the Cocoa features. We have a fairly good job because the application started and we can start working here, which was 6 months ago was unthinkable because not even the window was coming up. We are using complete NIT loading, so we did not rewrite the interface, we did not change the code, so we just added a make file and some if tests, but very few. So we had yesterday a presentation about portability, and this is a good example of how you can even rewrite the interface. Eventually we have to do it to tweak some aspects and some fine-tunings, but the general concept works quite well. The code itself is really portable because Mac programmers are quite sloppy. You can see that in the project. It works on the Mac, that's fine. The Mac has one architecture. Now, okay, it has two because it has Intel. At that time, it was just PowerPC, I think. So the code is absolutely reliant on a specific way the API works, the processor works, the operating system works, and so it needs to be made portable because currently, for example, it works reasonably on Intel, on Linux, but if you try it on other platforms, you make it tweak some things. And at the end, everything is done, we make a release and we can eventually complete the missing features because there are missing features and extend the application. So I think this is a major application which is interesting because there are currently no other open source alternatives to it. So if somebody is interested in this kind of spreadsheet model. Another project is Beam. It's called a simple word processor. This project is called by Gregory. This too is a Cocoa port. We took the last version of Beam, which runs on 10.4 Mac, and fork the code and put it in here. And this goes in further down the road because it doesn't even have a makefile. We use directly the PBX build tool to build the Xcode. So it's pretty much the extreme way we can do
it. Completely unmodified.
Yes. It has some if-thens in the code currently, some of them can be removed. And it was this and FlexiSheet really prompted a lot of work, minor and major in GNU that to be compatible, and it's almost usable now, so it's very nice. There are still some bugs which prevent it from daily usage, some save problems with RTF bundles if you have images and text, but it will be worked out. And this tool is handy if you don't want to use text editor or ink, which are fairly simple. The screenshot is the toolbar gets slightly used. The menu gets inherited from the Mac. Of course, there are separators which make no sense in this, but it works, so it's very good. The good thing is if we have the same application on the Mac and on GNU step, which is the goal of the GNU application project to be able to provide this, it's much easier to exchange data, and you may have a Mac laptop and GNU step workstation or the other way around. It's easy. We have a couple of games which are written by a gifted programmer. I maintain them. And they will screenshot because games. You can just play with games, make it screenshot.
Yeah.
But the future of the GNU application project, we have other couple of applications we want to implement. They are actually half written currently, but not maintained because we shifted to the last project we have, like FlexiSheet and Dina and Vespucci are consuming all our because it's so big. And also because these applications are not so blocking, but it would be nice to have a login, which would be one way to implement it would be to be compatible with XDisplay Manager, for example, so it would be maybe Unix specific, say with lower native login. And we are thinking about an installer for the end user, so if you don't want to use your distribution packages, which is one way to do it, we want to have an installer which just takes, like the Apple one, but a bit more advanced because it should be able to handle different architectures. So the best thing we have our draft for that is to have a single table which contains, for example, Solaris, Linux, BSD, PowerPC, Intel, and then the installer will install the correct one. Dependency tracking and uninstalling are planned. Apple doesn't have that weird. Some people say it's not useful because maybe you want to have an interaction with a distribution installer. It depends. Either use completely that one and don't use the installer, or if you have a clean environment, theoretically you can just, if you just have GNU step, you just can use your installer, you install the system and, I mean, how you do on the Mac.
I think it depends on the user. If the user wants to have a GNOME environment or maybe Ubuntu or what.
It depends if it's a mixed environment or not.
It's like if the user decides to use some environment and some packaging tool, maybe we should provide our programs for those packages too. And somebody who wants to use a pure GNU-step environment can then use the installer.
It's not our goal not to provide packages for other distributions of that. If you want a certain kind of environment. Then there's another tool which is NFS config. The idea would be to have a tool to configure and mount NFS volumes, just a convenience. Other applications of the same kind flow in the air, like system administration tools, we just mentioned here. So not portable applications, but which are convenient. So a bunch of tools to administer users, administer your network cards, so things you expect from an environment. A web editor, well, first we make a browser, then we think about the editor, but sometimes it's handy to have a web editor for writing documentation, so something lightweight. We imagine something really lightweight, where you like write FTF to just write your titles. Not like complete CSS, not a Dreamweaver replacement, but a handy tool.
Just to avoid writing HTML.
Yes, exactly, because often the goal is to have HTML in widespread use, which is what Apple today's do. So you have documentations, program help, notes in HTML. So sometimes coding that is tedious. Some people request an instant messaging application. Some people want Java, some people want Microsoft Messenger, Yahoo, ICQ, and you can't name them. There are so many protocols. Even Mac projects have failed with that. So they start, they work for a bit, they become incompatible because they depend on some libraries. These libraries are not contained anymore, so there's a new one. It's a moot area, and probably people have started working on it. More office-oriented applications, we have a text editor, we have a spreadsheet, but that's maybe not enough. But writing an office suite is, of course, a big task.
Yeah.
We have a Lighthouse application for Sun, we will never get them. Some people still dream about that, but that's not going to happen. So maybe that's not pressing, but if GNU-Step gets more desktop-oriented, that might be a point to work on, because I think somehow people expect it. I mean, KDE has K-Office. In GNOME you have GNOME Office because you have numeric. Of course, there's OpenOffice, which is alien to everything.
Yeah.
So everybody has his idea about, and we'll see if other developers come in, they may bring new ideas on. Dictionary tool. This is just a way to. There was one under OpenStep. We might think there is an open dictionary format. We were also thinking about something which integrates with Wikipedia, for example. Just something where you can either look up translations.
The digital website application. You're thinking about the digital website application?
Yes.
Okay.
Existed. There is already a translation dictionary by Robert Burns. So there are ideas floating around. It's of course neither pressing, neither an essential tool, but it's handy. I mean, if you have it convenient to look up water. That's it, essentially. As far as GAP goes, OSChedule had a prize on the list, which is an imaging application. I can present that, but given your presence, I have also a couple of slides on simple WebKit, which might be of more interest if you are interested on the web framework.
May I ask some questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay. How about licenses? You said that you changed one project the license from BSD to
I can do that because I'm the original author.
Yeah, of course. But why that? And is it okay to put an BSD license project into the GAP, or?
Theoretically, it's okay because Savannah just requires it an official open source license, which BSD is. But if we have the ability to change license, we prefer GPL and GPL.
Okay.
That was decided by Gregory and essentially agreed with because it's cleaner that way and it's compatible with GNU-Step itself. Since we already had license problems in the past, it's better to avoid them from the beginning.
Next question. What about GNU-main app? It looks like it's abandoned. Nothing changed over a long time right now. Do you know what's up with the author? What's
the author is still alive. He says he has patches. If you report problems, he has the attitude it's saying always it's a GNU-Step problem. which is not always true. So it's a bit of, again, whose fault is it? And I don't like his attitude in this case. It's a brilliant application. I think it's one of the most complete applications we have of GNU-Step, and I used to use it every day for a long time under Linux. We don't have plans to import it in GAP because we don't have the resources to track another big application.
So
we have plans actually to rewrite the code. Currently, the whole GUI is hard-coded.
The whole GUI is hard-coded in?
So on the Mac, the mod port uses NIPS and the GNU-Step port uses hard-coding of GUI, with several applications do. Terminal is also completely hard-coded because some author like that way. And at the end, one idea, Gregory, of course, because he's the government planist, that everything should use Chrome. For terminal, we already have the idea to rewrite the interface to use Chrome because it's more maintainable. You can translate it because we are going to provide translations because some people request translations, which is of course correct. And with GROM file, it's easy. Just provide another GROM file, a language format. We do that with localized playing. You can do it. It's a useless playing. So. And the same should be done for GNU Mail. But the idea is, if we do that and we send him patches, what will he do with these patches?
Okay, he's not very
responsive to external. He has actually he had provided 90 tarbers on his website. So yes, they're not updated, but it's much better than the last release.
Okay.
So it has features like red arcs. I don't know why they released the tab.
Maybe you should poke them a little bit.
We do that.
Maybe I myself too, or whatever.
Yes, maybe if it's always the same person poking, the whole community should poke it, because I know that it has a wider usage. The guy was contacted by Apple to pitch Apple Mail, and especially the MIME framework, Pantomime, to be used by Apple. I don't know if at the end it happened. That speaks about the quality of this MIME framework.
Okay.
He told me that one. It's used by some codec software, the Pantomime framework.
Yeah,
yes, but
do you plan modernizing the interface of several applications, like adding these toolbars and stuff like that?
Some already have toolbars, some are incomplete. Yes and no. It depends on application. For some applications, definitely, I'm going to definitely update the Grapos interface, which is outdated and incomplete. And I want first to make a release like it is, the original one, and then I plan to change the inspectors and update it to be more coherent in the loop, like use colorways, sliders instead of.
Do you know some remarks? Do you know Bookmarker, written by Markus Müller?
No.
It's a small bookmarking application, which what's the word in it in English?
Say it in German.
Verwalten.
Manage?
Oh yeah, which manages your bookmarks and can open bookmarks from within the application. It's a central place to manage all your bookmarks. And he ported it to GNU-Step once, but then he ended up there's no use for it in GNU-Step because there's no GNU-Step application who opens or sends URLs. So maybe you should talk to him.
We can. He's not around here at FOSDEM?
He was here yesterday.
Okay,
He's a small guy.
We can talk to him because I added there is an experimental support for services. If you know Mac, you know there are services, and on the Mac you can already use Vespucci and say open URL into. So it should be easily integratable. And I tried to hack this on GNU-Step and it works. You have a URL in Mail. You can double click on it currently, but you can select it and say open in Vespucci.
It's a full-featured bookmark application. Maybe you could make good use of it.
I don't know if he integrates, for example, with Safari I don't know how he does it, but we can talk. I mean, my feeling is it's compatible with the Safari one.
Maybe
there's the same
a
service.
little bit given up on it too because he hasn't much time for it, whatever. Maybe you could ask him for
If
it.
it works on the Mac, and it's one of the keywords is integration. So the more we integrate, the more complete the user experience is. So.
Did you look also on other projects from the Mac side like CyberDuck and Colloquy?
CyberDuck?
CyberDuck is an FTP application.
I don't know that one.
Maybe I'll show you it later.
I remember
The yellow dot.
Yellow rubber duck icon.
I remember CyberDuck as an open doc web
I mean, it's
browser.
like a duck. It's like the
Endpoint.
Donald Duck.
No, the only FTP application I know was WIPO, which was interesting, but in some sense is broken by design, and it implemented only passive FTP, so I ended up buying one.
Do you know Colloquy? I don't know how it's
No, I don't. I know
Announced.
it exists, but I never used it, and
it's a chat application, and
I think that the Twilight guys use it, right?
they use it has support for that special protocol. The Thai guys use this Slick protocol, but it's a Cocoa application, and maybe could be ported.
Maybe it could be ported.
And then the Open Office guys are planning to use Cocoa for the Mac port.
Actually, I know there has been talks about that, but I think we can have a short presentation on the simple WebKit. Yes, we still have time. This is the core of this Pucci. As said, the goal is to provide a web rendering engine framework. And it's part of FUSDEM. So it's an official project. It's under the GNU umbrella. The main author is Nicolas Schaller, who is the manager, founder, and CEO of Golden Delicious Computers. His main goals and targets are handheld devices. I have his documentation here, business documentation here. He is the importer of these Linux computers. He works on the Open Motor, ZAOS, and all those small and nifty tools. So he needed a small web engine. He's the founder and the main programmer. That's all done for the work on it. Then there's me. I'm the tester. I'm the guy who insisted that he put his code open source and used it, and I maintain the core, make the many files. And since I use it in this Pucci, at the end I'm also test the result. I also mentioned Fred Kiefer, which is a GUI maintainer. He did not write a single line of code in simple WebKit, but he has been very kind in fixing bugs and completing GUI so that it works, because the WebKit engine is really taking out the maximum of GNU-step GUI, because it uses a text attributed string inside a text cell to display the whole web page. So it's an interesting approach. It works. It can work, of course, if there are no bugs.
Can it be feature complete in the end? Can it display tables and stuff like that?
Theoretically, yes. It can. It's not. Tables is the most
Complicated
thing, but it's half working on Mac 10.5. Mac 10.5 has a table which can be embedded in text view. So since it can be done, it's just a matter of coding it.
Okay, it's not in GNU-step itself. It's
No, not yet.
Okay.
So what the main features? It should be a web-compatible drop-in replacement. So the API is exactly the same. And in fact, the demonstration as this Pucci on the Mac can be compiled either with the Cocoa WebKit or simple WebKit just by linking different target run and the same application work. It's not the same binary for the reason of how Apple manages frameworks, but it's not a big hassle. Strong points. We are cross-platform, really cross-platform. Since GNU is cross-platform and the code is entirely based on Coco libraries, we work on GNU. It works on Coco, so the author continuously check the same code on Coco, GNU and MyStep. So we see the differences. What is MyStep? MyStep is like a smaller cousin. It's a GNU environment optimized for very small devices. So it's for handhelds, palm devices. The author is not here to show it. We are tested on many architectures since GNU works. We have tested this on Solaris, on BSD, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, Linux PowerPC. Some platforms were not so easy. For example, we know that Spark has issues with nil structures and other. So when we work, I don't think WebKit works as well because they don't need to. And pure Objective-C, that is, I will say it loud again, it's no Objective-C++ version because Apple made an abomination. It compiles from GCC 295 upwards. So this makes us extremely portable, and having support for other compilers is very convenient for strange architectures. So on Linux we have always 4.1, 4.2, whatever. On other platforms it's not always the way or there are bugs. So it's convenient to support any compiler. In fact, we run on Perl. We are one of the very, very few browsers that run nothing on GNU, Perl, and work. I hope we still work. We worked 1 month ago, so. And just can I mention, Solaris 2.5 on Spark, Vespucci runs. OpenBSD Spark, where there are very few browsers, we run. The footprint is small, so the unstripped binary is between 1 and 3 megabytes, depends on the processor architecture, of course. If you strip it, the size goes down further. So this is probably the heritage from being an embedded framework. Possible uses, browsers, it's clear, both on workstation and handheld. So the goal is, for example, if you need to browse. But it goes further, since the WebKit, the goals are similar to the WebKit itself. So you can have help and documentation viewers, which read HTML. And one of the extensions, to return to GNU Mail, is to support the viewing of HTML mail in mail applications. We have asked Ludovic to look about it because currently the framework is sufficiently complete to support at least a simple email HTML attachment. So the rendering of simple styles and headers is enough, so it would be already a big improvement. And another usage is like kind of, this is not implemented, it's on my to-do list, because everyone wants it and nobody wants to actually code it. It's in MyStep, so GNU can support it for sure. It's just a matter of writing it a bit differently. Converting HTML to an NTF document. Since we display an S-attributed screen, you can do that conversion, and it can be very convenient sometimes. But in the near future, we need to fix some essential issues like line items, tables, there are some bugs. We do have potential for JavaScript support, so our goals are probably much wider than, for example, other embedded and small browsers like Dillo. So
maybe you should ask to talk to David Chisnall. He's very advanced, but when it comes to runtime,
we can
language features and stuff like that. And he implemented several languages and scripting stuff, and maybe he's the right person to talk to.
We have a JavaScript interpreter, so that one is pretty basic, but we can at least parse the syntax much better than other simple browsers. Of course, it's not Mozilla, but Dillo bugs in some pages where we at least don't display anything because we can't point to the page. And another thing is CSS, at least inline style attributes. So complete CSS support is very difficult, but modern HTML, they call standard HTML attributes as CSS inline. And so it's still HTML as far as features go, so the DOM tree you get is very similar, but it's written differently, and right now it's just ignored. So adding that should not be too difficult. And of course, tons of bug fixes. In the long-term roadmap, so where do we want to go? It would be nice to have a complete JavaScript support, at least as far as ECMAScript specification goes, which doesn't mean you can do any JavaScript page because there are so many queries and what's around, but at least you know you have some JavaScript you can use for example, applications like help and most compatible pages at least. CSS 1 and 2 is on the to-do list, but that will be probably the most difficult part. Speed improvements, there can be many. There should be both optimization of the parser and in the way we display things, because since we use a text view, we need to be a bit smart on what we update, otherwise we spread the text view, draw in a rect a bit too much. Other bug fixing, I can write it on every page, bug fixing. And the goal of the author, Nicholas, is to have SVG processing, because for handheld devices it can be very convenient. I know that not many web pages actually use it, but it's a nice feature, I think, because it's standard, and if you need to display graphics inside a page, it should be standard. If not, don't know why. That's it. That was simple WebKit, and if somebody else is instead interested in price, which was listed on the program, he can ask me personally, go to the website. Other questions? I think I made up my time.
Yeah, I think so.
Everybody else came late. We can see some applications live. What's next on the agenda?
Next is Quentin in exchange for Nicholas Roth, but he did not show up yet.
If he did not show up, we can, for example, look at Graphos. Which is a drawing application where you can show vector drawing using NS-Bezier-Path. These are squares, but actually drawn as Bezier-Path. And of course, for excellent Bezier-Path support. You can do anything. Here we are using the art backend, which just optimally displays this kind of graphics. Everyone was very smooth and very nice. You can even zoom. At least you should be able to zoom anything once. But it's a good starting point for an application. Okay, if you are really adventurous, we can try to launch with Pucci if we have network connection. Of course, we have a project for it. because of the net and nothing maybe displays. But you want more? If you want,
At least you can read it.
we can check our test files and see what we can also see the bugs, the shortcomings it has. We should have here. For example, we see that the title here is not correctly or the correct font, which is a shortcoming with new step. And we have support for quite complete of special characters like umlauts, ligatures.
Okay.
The translation for foreign characters is good, and the translation table is quite standard complete, which was a lot of work because there are hundreds of symbols of the code within the Unicode and the display. But we see, for example, that the list is not complete, but it's coming along nice. This is intentional that we can say the bookmarks because we don't have the right to write them. But these questions, otherwise we wait for Quentin perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.